Most fairy tales begin with "once upon a time," but Ariana's begins with silence. At age 12, she chose to close her lips and tighten her throat, uttering not a single word for 8 long years. For those 8 years, she has been an invisible ghost in Alpha King Dorian's palace, scrubbing floors by day and slipping through corridors as a silent shadow by night. To the nobles, she is forgettable. To the king, she is no one. Yet her heart belongs to the man who doesn't even know her name. Her silence is not a choice, but a sacrifice. To speak is to risk the mate bond that killed both her parents in a single, terrible moment. This is a primal story of wolves, destiny, and a girl who gave up her voice not to gain a prince's love, but to escape fate itself. Looking at the image of the platinum-haired young woman in her teal gown, standing in the autumn courtyard, with the dark-haired Alpha King watching her from behind, one might see a romantic scene. But look closer at her downcast eyes, the way she holds herself apart, the careful distance she maintains even as he watches. This is not a girl waiting to be claimed. This is a girl who has spent 8 years making herself disappear. In the stone corridors of Dorian's palace, Ariana has perfected the art of being nothing. She pours wine at banquets where no one looks at her face. She changes linens in chambers where conversations continue, as if she isn't there. She serves breakfast to warriors who debate strategy around her, as though she were furniture. The court calls her the mute girl, when they bother to call her anything at all. But silence is her shield, her sanctuary, her survival. Because Ariana knows what the others don't. The mate bond is not the blessing the songs claim, not the romantic destiny the stories promise. It is a chain that binds 2 souls so tightly that when one dies, the other follows. She knows because she watched it happen. She was 12 years old when her father fell in a border skirmish, and she saw her mother, strong, fierce, beloved, collapse in the same instant, her life force torn away as the mate bond dragged her into death. Ariana's scream of anguish that night was the last sound she ever made. So she locked her voice away, believing the moon goddess cannot forge a bond with someone who has no voice to pledge, no words to seal the ancient rites. For 8 years, it has worked. She is invisible. She is safe. She is alone. Until tonight, when Counselor Thane will poison the king's wine, and Ariana will have to choose between her silence and Dorian's life. Until tonight, when the Alpha King will finally, truly see her, and once Dorian looks at the mute servant girl with those intense dark eyes, he will not look away. Because destiny, like the wolf inside her, cannot be caged forever. This is the story of a girl who tried to outrun fate, and the Alpha King who refused to let her disappear. Chapter 1. The spilled wine. The great hall blazed, with candlelight, 300 flames reflecting off silver platters and the jeweled throats of visiting dignitaries. Ariana moved between the tables like water, silent and unnoticed, refilling goblets with wine, the color of blood. She had learned long ago to make herself small at these state dinners, to become part of the architecture itself. At the high table, Alpha King Dorian sat in conversation with Counselor Thane, their heads bent together over maps of the northern territories. Dorian's dark hair fell across his broad shoulders, his fur-trimmed cloak marking him as the apex predator in a room full of wolves. Ariana approached from his left, pitcher ready, eyes downcast as always. That's when she saw it. Thane's hand moving with practiced subtlety, fingers uncurling over Dorian's goblet, a whisper of white powder disappearing into red wine. Time fractured. Her wolf, dormant for 8 years, suddenly screamed inside her chest. Not him, not this man. Ariana's body moved before her mind could catch up. She stumbled, or appeared to stumble, and the heavy pitcher tilted. Wine exploded across the high table in a crimson wave, flooding across maps and plates, cascading into Dorian's lap. The hall fell silent except for the drip, drip, drip of expensive vintage hitting stone. Then chaos erupted. Nobles gasped. Servants rushed forward. But Ariana felt none of it because Dorian's eyes had locked on her with an intensity that pierced straight through her carefully constructed invisibility. His gaze was molten, searching, seeing her for the first time in 8 years. Her wolf whimpered and pressed against her skin, desperate to emerge after so long buried. "You," Dorian said, his voice cutting through the commotion. "What is your name?" Ariana could only lower her eyes, her heart hammering, her lips pressed tight against the words that wanted to escape. "Bring her to my study," Dorian commanded, still watching her. "Tonight." The invisibility she'd worn like armor for 8 years shattered in that single moment. She was seen. Chapter 2. The King's Question. Tworsna's private study smelled of leather and pine smoke, the kind of room where decisions of war and peace were made. Ariana stood in the center of the circular space, hands clasped, while the Alpha King circled her slowly. She could feel his eyes tracking every breath, every tremor. He moved like the wolf he was, patient, predatory, reading her the way hunters read tracks in snow. "Why did you spill the wine?" His voice was softer than she expected, but it held the unmistakable weight of command. Was it truly an accident? She kept her eyes on the floor, said nothing. "Can you speak at all?" He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Or do you choose silence?" Her wolf surged against her ribs, frantic after years of suppression. Being this close to him felt like standing too near a fire, dangerous, consuming. Every instinct screamed at her to run or submit, but she did neither. She simply stood, trembling, mute. "She's a spy, Marcus," Dorian's beta growled from his position by the door. "Thane probably sent her to—" "No." Dorian's hand rose, silencing Marcus without a glance. Then with unexpected gentleness, he lifted Ariana's chin with 2 fingers. Their eyes met for the first time, truly met, and the world tilted. His dark eyes widened with something like recognition, something ancient and inevitable stirring in their depths. The air between them crackled, charged with an energy that made her skin prickle and her wolf howl silently inside her chest. "Not a spy," Dorian murmured, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she couldn't. "You're afraid, but not of me." He dropped his hand but didn't step back. "You'll serve as my personal attendant from now on. Stay close. I'll unravel your mystery eventually." His lips curved slightly. "Since you won't give me your name, I'll call you Moonbeam. Those eyes, like silver in moonlight." She was no longer invisible, and that terrified her more than anything. Chapter 3. Fragments of the Past. Ariana laid out Dorian's breakfast in the private dining room, arranging bread and meat with hands that had done this 1,000 times. But now every movement felt observed, weighted with meaning. She could feel his presence, even when he wasn't in the room, like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. "Ari, come here, little wolf." Her father's voice echoed across 8 years as she poured hot tea. She remembered his laugh, the way he'd lift her onto his shoulders to watch the pack run beneath the full moon. Her mother beside them, radiant and whole, her hand resting over her heart where the mate bond glowed like an invisible thread connecting her to the man she loved. The teacup trembled in Ariana's grip. Then the messenger arriving at dawn. Her father fallen in a border skirmish, dead before his body hit the ground. Her mother's face going white as snow. "No," her mother whispered, hand clutching her chest. "No, I feel it." And then she collapsed, just collapsed, as if someone had cut her strings. The mate bond dragging her soul after her mate's, unable to exist without its other half. 12-year-old Ariana screaming, screaming, screaming. "Moonbeam?" Ariana gasped, returning to the present. The teacup had shattered on the floor. Dorian stood in the doorway, concern etched across his features. How long had he been watching? That night, she tried to complete her duties quickly, to slip away before he could corner her again. But everywhere she turned, he was there, emerging from the library as she passed, standing in the corridor outside the linen room, his dark eyes following her with that same unsettling intensity. From the war room, she heard him speaking to Marcus in low tones. "There's something about her, something familiar, like I've been searching for her my whole life without knowing it." Ariana pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering, and prayed to the moon goddess she'd been hiding from for 8 years. Please, don't let him figure it out. Chapter 4. The Wolf That Wouldn't Wake. The full moon hung low and heavy over the forest clearing, calling to every wolf in the kingdom. Ariana stood at the edge of the gathering, surrounded by wolves eager to shift and run, their excitement palpable in the crisp night air. She wanted to flee, to hide in her small servants' quarters, but Dorian's hand rested gently on her shoulder. "Perhaps the moon will break whatever holds your voice captive," he'd said earlier, his tone hopeful. "The goddess speaks loudest during the hunt." She'd tried to refuse, shaking her head frantically, backing away. But how could she explain without speaking? How could she tell him that shifting terrified her more than anything, that her wolf had been caged since the night she watched her parents die, that in wolf form the mate bond would be impossible to hide from? So now she stood, frozen, as the pack began to shift around her. Bones cracked and reformed. Fur rippled across skin. Wolves of every color emerged, shaking out their coats, howling their joy to the moon. They took off into the forest in a river of movement and sound. But Ariana remained human, trembling so violently her teeth chattered. To her surprise, Dorian didn't shift either. He simply led her to a fallen log at the clearing's edge and sat beside her, their bodies close but not touching. The silence between them was different now, not empty, but full of things unsaid. "I've never felt complete," Dorian finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. He stared up at the moon, his profile sharp and beautiful in the silver light. "Like half of me has been missing for years, like I'm searching for something I can't name." He turned to look at her, and his eyes held such raw vulnerability that her carefully constructed walls trembled. "Do you ever feel that way, Moonbeam? Like you're only half alive?" A single tear traced down Ariana's cheek. She nodded once. Yes, for 8 years, she'd been only half alive. Chapter 5. The Poisoner's Web. 3 royal guards died screaming in the night, their bodies convulsing with wolfsbane poisoning. By dawn, soldiers had found the evidence, a vial of the deadly substance hidden in the servants' quarters, assigned to the mute girl. Ariana had never slept in that room. She spent her nights in the attic, far from prying eyes. But she couldn't speak to defend herself. She could only stand silent as they dragged her to the dungeons, as Dorian's face twisted with something between fury and anguish. "I don't believe it," he'd said to Marcus, loud enough for her to hear. "But I have no choice. The law demands investigation." The cell was cold stone and iron bars. Ariana curled in the corner, wrapping her arms around her knees, wondering if Thane would finish what he'd started and kill her here, where no one could see. Instead, an elderly woman appeared at the bars just after midnight. Silver-haired and bent with age, she held a flickering candle that cast dancing shadows across her weathered face. "Ariana of the Silver Paw line," the woman whispered. "I wondered if you still lived." Ariana's head snapped up. No one had spoken her name in 8 years. "I'm Sage. I was your mother's healer." The old woman's eyes glistened with tears. "I tried to save her, child, but it wasn't just the mate bond that killed her. She'd been poisoned. Someone had been dosing her with shadow root for months, weakening her life force. When your father died, the bond death came too fast, too violent. Dark magic accelerated what should have been survivable." The words hit Ariana like physical blows. Not natural, not inevitable. Murder. "You've been hiding all these years for nothing," Sage continued. "The mate bond doesn't kill, child. It was twisted, corrupted. Your mother was murdered just as surely as your father." Ariana pressed her fist against her mouth, silent sobs racking her body. 8 years of silence, 8 years of hiding, all built on a lie. Chapter 6, The Alpha's Confession. Krian came to her cell at midnight, carrying blankets and a basket of food that smelled like fresh bread and honey. The guards had protested. Marcus had actually tried to block his path. But an Alpha King goes where he pleases. He set the basket down and sat on the cold floor just outside the bars, as if he belonged there beside her rather than on a throne. For a long moment he said nothing, just studied her face in the torchlight. "I was 16 when they came for my family," he finally said, his voice low and rough. "A coup. My father, mother, 2 sisters, all dead by dawn. I survived only because I was visiting the northern packs." He leaned his head back against the stone wall. "I spent 10 years clawing my way back to power, building strength, earning loyalty. But inside, I've been hollow, empty." Ariana watched him, her heart aching for the boy who'd lost everything. "The mate bond. I've never felt it. I thought perhaps the moon goddess skipped me, punishment for surviving when my family didn't." His dark eyes found hers through the bars, and the intensity there stole her breath. "Until you." He shifted closer, reaching through the bars. His hand hovered in the space between them, an offering. "Every time you're near, something in me wakes up, something that's been sleeping my entire life." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I feel complete when you're close, like I can finally breathe after drowning for years." Ariana's hand moved without conscious thought, reaching for his. The moment their fingers touched, electricity shot through her body. Her wolf surged up, howling in recognition. The air itself seemed to shimmer with golden light, the mate bond visible for a heartbeat, connecting them like a thread of pure starlight. Dorian's eyes widened in wonder and certainty. "It's you," he breathed. "You're my mate." Tears streamed down Ariana's face, but her lips remained sealed, even now, even for this. Chapter 7, The Usurper's Move. The coup came at dawn, swift and brutal. Ariana heard the clash of steel and screams echoing through the dungeon corridors before she saw the soldiers, Thane's men, not Dorian's, rushing toward her cell with murder in their eyes. "Kill her now," their captain snarled, "before the king can free her." But Sage was already there, ancient hands surprisingly strong as she pulled at a loose stone in the cell wall. "Here, child, quickly." The stone swung inward, revealing darkness and the smell of earth. A tunnel. Ariana didn't hesitate. She plunged into the blackness as blades struck the bars behind her. "Run to the throne room," Sage called after her. "He needs you." Ariana ran through twisting passages, her servant's dress tearing on rough stone, her lungs burning. Above her she could hear the sounds of battle, the palace tearing itself apart. When she finally burst through a hidden door into the great hall, the scene before her turned her blood to ice. Dorian knelt in the center of the throne room, bound in silver chains that burned his skin and suppressed his wolf. His loyal guards lay dead or dying around him. Blood ran from a wound at his temple, and his face was pale, too pale. Thane stood over him, a ceremonial blade pressed to Dorian's throat. "Ah, the mute girl," Thane said, smiling like a serpent. "Perfect timing. You see, I've been poisoning your precious king for months with shadow root, the same substance that killed your mother as it happens. Tonight I finish what I started." He pressed the blade deeper, drawing a line of crimson. "Kneel and acknowledge me as your alpha, little servant, or watch him bleed out right here." Dorian's eyes found hers across the room. Even now, even dying, they held no fear, only acceptance, and something that looked heartbreakingly like love. "Live," he mouthed silently. "Just live." But Ariana had been dead for 8 years already. Chapter 8. The breaking point time crystallized into a single, impossible moment. Ariana stood in the doorway. Dorian knelt bleeding with silver chains burning his flesh, and Thane's blade pressed against the throat of the only man who'd truly seen her in 8 years. Maintain silence and stay safe, or speak and risk everything. But as she looked into Dorian's dark eyes that held no plea for rescue, only understanding and a terrible, beautiful acceptance, something inside her finally broke open. He mouthed the words again. "It's okay. Live." And she realized with sudden, crushing clarity, she hadn't been living, not for 8 years. Her silence wasn't protection. It was a tomb she'd built for herself, a prison more effective than any dungeon. She'd been so afraid of dying through the mate bond that she'd forgotten what it meant to be alive. Ariana opened her mouth. Her throat felt strange, unused, the muscles awkward after so long. But sound came anyway, rusty, cracked, barely more than a whisper, yet it rang through the throne room like a bell. "No." The room went utterly still. Thane's eyes widened in shock. Dorian's breath caught. Then her wolf, caged for 8 years, starved for freedom, wild with recognition of her mate, exploded forth in a surge of silver light that blinded everyone in the room. Bones shifted, reformed. Her body stretched and changed, and for the first time since she was 12 years old, Ariana let her wolf free. She was magnificent, larger than any female wolf had right to be, her fur the color of moonlight, her eyes blazing silver fire. And when she threw back her head and howled, it wasn't a cry of pain or fear. It was the ancient challenge of a Luna claiming her mate and her throne, a sound that shook the very stones of the palace and announced to every wolf in the kingdom that the true queen had finally awakened. Chapter 9. The Blood Moon Claim. Ariana's howl shattered more than silence. It shattered Thane's silver chains. The mate bond, awakened and blazing between them, surged with power that turned the metal white hot and then to dust. Dorian rose, his own wolf erupting forth in midnight black, and together they moved. They fought as one creature with 2 bodies, anticipating each other's movements with supernatural grace. When Ariana lunged left, Dorian was already covering her right. When he feinted high, she struck low. The mate bond sang between them, a connection so pure and strong it made them unstoppable. Thane's conspirators fell like wheat before a scythe. Thane himself tried to run, but Ariana's jaws found his throat. Not to kill. She wasn't a murderer, but to pin him, to hold him until Dorian's loyal guards could restrain what remained of the traitor. Then, as the throne room fell silent except for labored breathing, Ariana shifted back. Her human form felt strange after so long in wolf shape, but right somehow. Whole. She knelt beside Dorian as he too shifted back, blood and sweat covering them both. "My name," she said, her voice cracking but growing stronger with each word, "is Ariana, of the Silver Paw line. My parents died when I was 12, and I thought the mate bond killed them. I thought it would kill me too." Tears streamed down her face. "I was so afraid of dying that I forgot how to live, but I'm not afraid anymore." She took his hand, placed it over her heart. "I claim you, Dorian of Ironhold, as my mate under the moon goddess's ancient rites. I choose this bond. I choose you. I choose life." The mate bond blazed between them, golden and pure, filling them both with strength instead of draining it. Sage appeared at the throne room entrance, smiling through tears. "The true mate bond never destroys," the old healer said softly. "It only strengthens. Your mother's death was murder, child. Dark magic twisting what should have been beautiful. The real bond respects will, respects choice, respects love." Dorian pulled Ariana close, pressing his forehead to hers. "My mate, my queen." And when Ariana finally stood before the assembled pack, those loyal guards who'd survived, the servants who'd never truly seen her, the nobles who'd looked through her for 8 years, her voice rang clear and strong. "I am Ariana, Luna Queen of Ironhold. I have been silent, but I am silent no longer. I have been hidden, but I hide no more. I have been afraid, but fear will not cage me again." She looked at Dorian, at the mate bond shimmering visible between them, and smiled. "I choose to live. Finally, truly, completely, I choose to live." The pack howled their acceptance, and for the first time in 8 years, Ariana howled back. She was free,